So how did this Chicago gang receive $1 million from the US government? Eugene Hairston and Jeff Fort together founded the Chicago gang called the Black Keystone Rangers in 1959. At the time, it was just a small group of teenage boys looking for protection and defense against the other gangs in the south side of Chicago. The gang's first initial goal was to start assisting in efforts to clean up the community of crime and drugs, in which they eventually played a major part in committing themselves. Just to paint a picture, at this time in the 60s, almost 30% of blacks were in poverty, which means you made less than $1,600 a year, and with not enough jobs available and the civil rights movement just starting up, you understand the poor and dire conditions a lot of black people lived in at the time. So it wasn't abnormal to draw some attraction to the illegal activities that provided some extra income, which the gang happened to fall victim to as well. The newfound gang quickly grew its reputation, being involved in alleged crimes, drug trafficking, murders, but mostly for violence, especially against their rival gang, the Devil's Disciples. Despite the negative attention, they would also garner a positive reputation locally, supposedly keeping drugs, alcohol, and prostitutes out of their neighborhoods and making genuine attempts to form lasting peace treaties with other rival gangs to decrease the level of fighting in the south side of Chicago. However, it was also said the gang would extort the local pimps or drug dealers. In order for them to stay in business, they had to pay the gang a percentage while also abiding by their rules. Because of this, everyone had mixed feelings about the true nature of the gang. The gang would deny the negative allegations when approached by local officials, claiming they are protecting while trying to clean up their neighborhoods. Eventually, Jeff Fort gained complete control of the gang after Eugene was convicted and sent to prison. Immediately following, Jeff changed the name of the gang to the now widely known Black Keystone Nation. Jeff was known for his charisma, courage, overall leadership since he was a kid. As quoted, Fort's charisma and his amazing recruiting skills made him special. He traveled with an entourage wearing snappy clothes that dictated neighborhood fashion. When he walked by the local elementary school, kids on the playground would pile up along the fence just to get a look at him. Fort was like a godfather, giving shoes to kids who needed them, also finding homes for families who were evicted. His celebrity is obvious, given he managed to recruit over 5,000 members, including 21 separate gangs in which Jeff negotiated a governed coalition between them all called Main 21. The community grew to accept Jeff and his gang, being that they were noticeably making an effort to clean up the neighborhood, from giving out gifts to the kids to even assisting in creating jobs, also feeling they needed his protection to prevent rival gangs from attacks within their neighborhoods. The gang would even get involved in political activism, resulting in them being viewed as an asset to help fix the poverty and violence in Chicago. With Jeff's assistance, they formed the Woodlawn Organization, a grassroots community association made up of several groups with 100 members ranging from religious, political, and businesses in the area of the south side of Chicago, with their main focus to help reform young adults within the city. Jeff and his newfound organization created a favorable public image by hosting local events centered around providing a positive influence. Following Jeff reaching a peace treaty with the rival gang, the Disciples, including assistance from other local leaders in the community, under their Woodlawn Organization, they applied for a federal grant loan from the government, and surprisingly, it was approved for $1 million. The money was given to set up a special youth project and start a gang-run job training program for 800 out-of-school unemployed youths. The president at the time, Richard Nixon, even praised their efforts and invited Jeff to his inauguration, which he declined, instead sending 2 of his lieutenants to attend. Now that they had the funds and an alliance with the Disciples, both gangs set up 4 job training centers between both of their territories. One of the centers was located in the First Presbyterian Church in the area, headed by Reverend John Fry, who was eager to help the gangs accomplish their positive goals. The gang hosted performances from local acts at the church, garnering an attendance of 8,000 people in its coming weeks. Unfortunately, a lot of the local officials in Chicago were not impressed, including the mayor. Furious and afraid that Fort, who was a gang member, managed to override their local government by the gang receiving that amount of money which they couldn't oversee. The mayor did not believe Fort was a reformed gang member and feared Fort would instead use that money to further the gang's power and drug business. Eager to follow the gang's every move, the mayor responded by creating the Gang Intelligence Unit and staging repeated raids on their training facilities with the focus to lock up as many gang members and leaders as possible for any petty crimes they could find. Even headlining in the local newspaper any arrest or acts of violence from gang members to show that they were still criminals. With a lot of the gang members, including Jeff, being unable to stay out of trouble, altogether aided in shattering the gang-filled organization's positive public image. Hell-bent on bringing down the organization, they opened up an investigation on every member associated, first questioning the gang's use of the Reverend John Fry in his church. They claimed the church was only a place for secret gang meetings. They used it to store their guns, sold and used drugs on top of other illegal activities. They would later go as far as arresting Fort, accusing him for a murder of a rival gang member, and held him in jail for 5 months until March 1968, when his charges were completely dropped. Though Fort would deny any involvement and allegations against them, the final straw against the organization came when a Disciples gang member was shot in one of their centers from an apparent gang-related shooting. The shooting was said to have been an accident, but the detectives who investigated the shooting found evidence to contradict those claims, on top of discovering that drugs was being used at the Disciples Center. With the amount of evidence they obtained, they then accused Fort and 23 members with mismanagement of the money received and for tons of crimes committed in the area. On top of being accused of murder, including with the now negative publicity, almost all the corporations that agreed to assist Fort's programs walked away, not wanting to be associated with the accusations directed at him and his gang. With the gathered evidence during the investigation, the local government held a hearing included with news coverage questioning every member or person associated with the organization. During the hearing, they had local witnesses testifying against the organization, stating the gang, from the start, had no interest in job training and that the program was used only to increase the gang's membership as well as its finances. That the church and Reverend John Fry were attempting to control and direct the gang through influence over Jeff Fort, using his power to extort local businesses in a form of protection, and of course a long list of other crimes. Fort was then subpoenaed to testify before the committee. After arriving with his attorney and being sworn in, his lawyer requested that the committee allow Fort to confront and cross-examine the witnesses who had testified against him. The request was refused by Senator McClellan under authority of the committee rules. After a heated exchange, Fort's attorney advised him to not take the stand, so Fort stood up and walked out of the room. He was cited for contempt of Congress, and they would later seek conviction. After several years went by, the administration finally felt they had enough evidence to convict them and indicted Fort as well as other members of Black Keystone Nation with a grand jury on charges of extortion, mismanaging funds, and involvement in criminal activity. They even managed to use their rivals, the Devil's Disciples, as key witnesses against them in their prosecution. The biggest claim, which was extortion, Fort's attorney, James Montgomery, argued at the trial, is documented that the government was paying these gang members to assist them with staying off the streets and to stop killing one another. So how can you charge the gangs with extortion of the government when the program was initially intended all along for the gang to receive money from the government in order to assist them? An assistant U.S. attorney would argue otherwise, producing evidence that gang members had falsified documents, were gambling, committed murders, as well as other illegal activities while working under the organization with the funds provided. They claimed the gang was just giving money away to its members with no real training taking place in Fort's facilities. The organization's defense countered, stating many of the members were provided with decent jobs, and many more would have been helped if they had support from the local government instead of constantly being discredited publicly and harassed by the mayor and local law enforcement. They advised the money that was given out was used to the trainees only to motivate them to stay out of the streets and focused on training and assisting them with finding a real job. They didn't want to focus on educating its members on how to pass for a diploma or a GED, as some suggested, and instead focused on teaching them skills to get employed. The state countered that the gang engaged in robberies, extortion, and forced recruitment while demanding protection payments from prostitutes prostitution operations, and drug dealers. In the end, by a grand jury, Fort and 2 others were found guilty, convicted of misusing federal funds, and were sentenced to 5 years in prison. So, in the end, what happened to the $1 million they were given? Though Jeff Fort was found guilty, it's confirmed by his organization he had only been paid a total of $1,467.79 as center chief, and they never did spend all of that grant money, turning back an estimated $200,000 to the federal government. And to further note, by a conservative estimate, barely 1/3 of the $1 million grant had gone to the Blackstone Rangers. There is no denying the good and bad things surrounding Jeff Fort and his gang. Some would say he was a product of his environment with good intentions, while others would say he was a gang member seeking to misuse the fortune allotted to him and his gang to further his criminal empire. In the end, you be the judge. But if you like this video, make sure you subscribe for more.